Thanks everybody for joining us. We had some technical difficulties today, but I'm glad everybody's here. This is our busy webinar for May of 2022. This is our first time with a new format, so we're having a few bumps, but so far so good. My name is Trigby. I'm the Director of Business Development here at BusyWeb. And today, not only are we going to be talking about automating your marketing to provide more value, we're also joined by Dave, the president and founder of BusyWeb. Hey, Dave.
Hey, everybody. How are you? Hey, Trig.
Well, this should be fun. This is something that you and I know a lot about and have done a lot. And so hopefully everybody will get some enjoyment from what we're going to do today. So awesome. Just for those of you who are new and haven't necessarily heard of us before, we are a full service growth marketing agency that's based in the Twin Cities. We take on anything under the sun as it relates to your digital footprint and help take it from being pretty good to even better and awesome. And ultimately what we want to do is help you grow your business. So anything that I've got on screen here, we can take care of. We are a Grow with Google high impact partner. We're also a platinum HubSpot agency, and that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So if you need anything from us, we'll give you our contact information at the end, but that's who we are and what we do. Dave, how long have you been working at BusyWeb?
So BusyWeb was officially formed in '99. So outside of this century even, which means 23 years. There you go. And
you have your own print song for a founding year.
See, perfect. We're almost to our whatever 25 is. So
I think I've been here since 2014. So it seems like forever. So today we're going to be talking about automation, but I wanted to start and frame this discussion in how we think of sales and marketing today, which is going to be a flywheel discussion. We'll talk about some of the differences between flywheels and funnels, and then we're going to talk about how to automate your marketing and your sales efforts to pick up speed and reduce friction. So, sound good to you, Dave?
Sure thing. Can't wait.
Awesome. So now that we have this great big lofty goal that we are going to grow our business together, okay, this is great. This should be easy, right? Well, not so much. The reason behind that is there's a pretty big crisis in trust. Ever since the pandemic started and everybody had to move online, there's a lot of business to be had and all of it is generally good, but the trust factor has sort of fallen through the floor, and marketers are trusted almost as much as salespeople now. Fortunately, we're still beating politicians, but more people trust their barista than they trust marketers and salespeople together. So people can't just take our word for it anymore. They've got to actually see value, and they've got to see value throughout the entire part of the process. The second thing that we've noticed a lot since the start of the pandemic is that more often than not, one of the most valuable points of new business or return business that people haven't necessarily been able to see is word of mouth. So everybody is focused on sitting through webinars and people who are giving their 8 secrets to new logo acquisition and 8 secrets to just sign up for this, and then all of a sudden you'll grow even more. But more often than not, a lot of new customers come from word of mouth. And so, Dave, what's been your experience? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And the weird thing about word of mouth now is that it means a lot of different things. You know, it's not necessarily just you talking with your neighbor over the fence. It's people tweeting or Facebooking and posting things up, or someone asking for a recommendation on nextdoor.com or something. And so the act of being visible and being referable and being at the top of folks' mind kind of just trends back to being as useful and as helpful as possible, especially for B2B, where trust is such a huge thing in making high dollar purchases.
I think what's so interesting about that as you talk about trust is that the thing that you're offering for sale is now as valuable and as important as the experience you give somebody. and how they feel about working with you, because there's such a flattening effect because of search engines now that anybody can find anybody to do anything, but they're only going to work with the people that they want to and that they have faith in. So how do we leverage understanding these two things, that fewer people than ever want to focus on trust, and trust is even more important than ever? How do we reconcile that? Well, one of the ways in which we do that is we really sort of get back to basics and really look at what a traditional sales funnel is. Mm-hmm. And this is one of Dave's favorite slides, and it's one of mine as well. And this is really what gets into the 5-part process of what exactly is what is a sales process, and really what does it get into? And there's really 5 parts to it. The first part is the attract, second convert, and then close, and then delight. So really, those are the things that we're really focused on. And then people through that are moving through that process. You can see that with the circles I have on screen. So first, people are strangers. They don't know who we are. Then they become visitors. Then they become leads. Then they become customers. Then they become promoters. And there are different tools that we can use at different parts of the process in order to really make that work. But really what we start with is the idea that your customer has a problem. They don't know what it is, and they don't know what the solution is. And that's what that attract portion is. And that's what we're going to spend a little bit of time focusing on today. But ultimately, what we want to do through the different parts of the process is make sure that we're delivering what people want when they want it. So if we look at, and then obviously we do a lather, rinse, repeat. The more we can cycle through this and start to create that circular effect, the more valuable of a sales engine we really have. If we look at a traditional funnel, I mean, Dave, this is something you went to business school. This is something that they teach in business school just about on the first day, right? Mm-hmm. That marketing is it gets a whole bunch of people interested, and then it's the salespeople sort of synthesize it down, and then it gets down to customers, and then throughout the funnel. But at the end of the day, where are the customers at the end of that sequence? They're out. Yeah, they're out. You get them through once, and then they're done. So what we talked a little bit about the trust factor and the referral factor. That's because repeat business is far easier to win than new business. So people who are focused on new business, that's really hard because you're having to develop a relationship and try and convince them that you've got a solution. So you're essentially flying the plane while you're building it at the same time. But in a business environment, we don't always have to focus on that. We can focus on word of mouth, which drives more referrals, which then turns around and drives more sales, which means that we get more people getting put back into the funnel. But at the end of the day, the funnel is the customer is never really a part of it unless we're talking to them and actively engaging with them through that funnel. So instead, what we like to focus on is a flywheel aspect. So on the left, you can see we've got that old school funnel where, again, the marketing is part of it, and then the sales, but then the customers aren't really the focus. The process is the focus. And I would argue that your process, while it's important to you, isn't important to the people that you're trying to sell to. Would you agree with that, Dave? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What they want is a solution to their problem, and they want it easy, and they want it solvable. So instead, we have the flywheel. And how do you describe the flywheel here, Dave?
It's a way to close the loops on your funnel. So if you treat your customers as something that you can handle once and then never talk to again, well, then they're never going to come back to you again. And it's 10 times easier to get another sale from an existing customer than it is to find a brand new customer that's never heard from you. So the flywheel really closes that loop by treating a relationship with your customer as never ending. So you go from the traditional marketing of attracting, which is what most people do and use marketing for, and take it to the next step of engage. Engage is the act of having conversations and starting to solve problems and starting to identify things that actually matter for your customers. And then after they become customers, you're going to delight them. by telling them more, by helping them during the process, by helping smooth out all of the bumps in the sales relationship, and making sure that they have everything that they need and that they're successful as they're working with you, so that they're more willing to engage that word of mouth that we talked about before, and really to bring it back and tell all of their friends about you, and or probably come back to you again the next time they have a similar need.
I think of I think of this my way of describing the flywheel. I think what you said is absolutely right. Mine, I like to think of business as a restaurant now, a B2B business as a restaurant. Everybody's been to a restaurant. There's usually a couple of different parts to your restaurant experience. First is the person who sits you down at the table. They're the ones who are going to greet you. They're going to make you feel good. They're going to validate your choice. That's really the attract stage. Then the next part is the server who's going to come to you. They're going to engage you. They're going to ask you, what do you like? What do you not like? Do you have any food allergies? What are you hungry for? What's good here? Things like that. And then they're going to take your order, and then they're going to give it to somebody who's going to produce it. And then at the end of it, you're delighted because it comes out in a reasonable amount of time, and it really meets what you want. And so the great part about the flywheel is the customer's wants and needs and their way of growing is at the center of what you're doing. And then each of those three additional parts, how you attract people to start working with you, which is another way of saying marketing, is just as important as how do you engage with people, which is another way of saying sales, which is another way, which is just as important as how you delight people, which is another way of saying how you service people. So now, instead of having just a dedicated sales team, now everybody is what's considered in the restaurant industry as front of the house activities. Everybody is focused on doing what's best for the customer. And the reason behind that is customer retention is just about as important to your customer success as new customer acquisition. And statistically, about 5%, about a 5% increase in your customer retention ends up increasing your company revenue by a whole bunch. One of the other things to keep in mind, especially as we're talking about the flywheel, is most people have already experienced a flywheel model already. And that's the Amazon model. So Amazon originally, back when you and I were younger, Dave, do you remember what Amazon's real first business model was?
I think it was just shopping, right?
It was books. They sold.
Oh,
books.
yeah. I didn't remember that.
Yeah, you didn't even have to go to Barnes and Noble. You know, you'd spend about $10 less, and the book would come a couple of days later. But hey, you'd save $10. Isn't that great? So they had this great model over on the top where they were offering lower prices on books, and that was great. And then what happened is when people started to realize that, they started to get, they came back more and more and more and more and more. And then after a while, Amazon realized, hey, we don't have to sell just books. We can sell other stuff too. And so they attracted third-party sellers who started using their platform as a way to sell their products, which then expanded the store and it extended their distribution model. So now everybody goes to Amazon before they go anywhere, and they were able to grow revenues at a fixed cost model, which then allowed them to cycle back around and offer lower prices on more offerings. So everybody's seen this sort of model already, but it was all based on that idea of what's best for the customer and how can we offer the customer a really great experience, which is fantastic. But now Amazon's business model has ultimately changed. I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you ever ask somebody under 30 what is Amazon, they're not going to tell you they sell books. They're going to say they're a distributor of all things. So right. They've completely changed what they went for.
Yep.
So some of the tools to consider as you're talking about the flywheel, we're going to talk about a lot of these in some practical exercises coming up. But there are different tools that you use in different parts of the processes. So your track tools are things like ads, things like creating videos, creating long-form blogs. Social media is an attract tool. Having a content strategy really gets into how you are marketing to people. Then engagement is really where automation comes in, where you're automating your lead flows, you're automating your email marketing. you are having a regular cadence with your leads, and even using conversational bots to help answer questions to people as quickly as possible. And then delight, again, you can do a lot with the delight process, where you're providing smart content. You're doing more email marketing that's based on people not necessarily being prospects, but validating their decision throughout time, which then turns into more customer retention strategies, and then making sure that you are tying in, of all these assets that you have, what are the ones that are making you the most money, and where are you getting new customers and traffic from? That's called attribution reporting, which is fun. It's kind of deep end of the pool, and I think we're going to be talking about that later. So
yeah.
And again, as
that's really where this gets interesting, Trygve. I mean, once we talk about, and of course, the point of our conversation is how you're going to automate the marketing to provide more value to your customers. And I think as we look at that, it really is important to think about the next step for every customer that you work with. And that's kind of the point of the flywheel, right? So not only are you grabbing their attention, but then you need to earn that attention by engaging them, and then keep coming back for more by delighting. So I love these tools. And as we think about this, as we're looking at, automation for the marketing tools, that's kind of the lens through which I always look at this, especially in regard to this conversation. So super, super interesting.
Let me see if I can stump you here on the attract stage, Dave. Where do you, when people come to us and they're looking for growth strategies, and they have a lot of these tools that they've implemented them already, what's the biggest thing that we see that those customers are doing to their own detriment?
Most of the time in attract, they think old school. And so it's always me, 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 me. And what do I do? How long have I been in business? Why we are the preeminent source of XYZ. And they don't think about what their customers are looking for. So if you're browsing the web and you're looking, and we're all pretty good students of how to interact on the web now, right? Because we do it all the time. We're looking for things that are interesting to us. And if I go to a company's website, especially if it's a B2B company, I'm not interested in what you do as much as asking the question, can you solve my problem?
And is it really a problem to begin with? Or is it something that I'm imagining? Yeah, I would agree with that. I think one of the things that most businesses in their first stage of growth get to is that thinking that they are the most important thing. How long have I been in business? What's important to me? My values, the service I provide. That's great. And that's a part of the conversation, but it's not the whole of the conversation. The most important part of the conversation is how you can end up solving somebody else's problem, which is where we get in the engagement process. We're going to spend a little bit more time talking about the practical nature of these, but where would you say people tend to have issues in the engagement process?
So engage, it's usually, again, being too one-sided in their conversations. So you tend to think of, well, I'm posting on Twitter, or I've got a Facebook post, or I've got a blog, so that must mean I'm engaging. And it's not really true unless you're actually engaging and accepting conversations from your customer. So having an engaged process is more about sparking a conversation and getting that person, that prospect, to reply somehow, to respond to a call to action. And just having a blog that talks about you isn't actually engaging. Having a blog that talks about the need that you solve for your customer and tells them, click here to have a conversation, or what do you think, or participating in LinkedIn groups or something that spark actual discourse is the way to truly engage.
I would absolutely agree with that. I think one of the things that I see that in addition to that is that there's a certain silo effect, is that there's a handoff from marketing to sales. They never really talk, and they never really work together. And then the salespeople will always say, well, that the leads are terrible. You're not doing your job. And the marketing people are saying, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I keep giving you more leads. And so there's a clash there because those two groups aren't really talking as much as they could. And everybody's really in service of the logo, and that's one of the things that we talk about at BusyWeb is we all have different jobs, but we're all doing this in service of the bee, which is passing for my video right now, is we're all on the same team. And ultimately what we're trying to do is grow together.
Right.
So, and the key thing here that I like to talk about, and I'll ask you the question, Dave, just for stumping's sake, is on your way to work today, there's a billboard right near BusyWeb that you passed on your way in today, right? What was on it? Do you remember?
I have no idea. Actually, there's an electronic billboard that's on and it changes all the time, so I wouldn't know anyway. But I don't think anybody really sees it anymore because it's just there.
Yeah, that's really a good illustration of what advertising is. It's a volume-based play, and it's based on the idea that the more you see something, the more likely you are to buy, but that doesn't really work for small businesses. What we need people to do is we need people to see the messages and make sure that they feel important and validated by it, and then actually take action. And that's really what gets into the delight stage, where we're actually making sure that we see the things that we're putting out are actually creating a certain amount of response. And what's the biggest thing that I see here is I think much like a good golf swing, it doesn't end just when you hit the ball. You're still selling to people even though they're already customers, because you need to continue to validate everything that you've done so far is great, and everything that we're doing together is going to make you even greater. Because then what happens is you're not a vendor anymore, you're a partner. And your customers grow to depend on you more than they think of you as an added expense or that thing that I have to pay. So we want to get into how this actually relates to marketing automation. And so we're going to talk about this in terms of our favorite tool, which is called HubSpot. But certainly there's a lot of different ways in which you can do marketing automation. And I think one of the things, Dave, that is really indicative of the problem with the flywheel is, as you think about it, everything that we just talked about is great in theory, right? All of these things that you can do and all of these different activities that you can go after in order to create a spinning flywheel. That takes an ocean of time to really do and to really dial it in and get it to a point where it's working and it's functioning and you can leave it alone. So the first thing that automation really is going to do for us is figure out where in our flywheel process are ways that we can pick up speed. So we can push that wheel to move a little bit further. So I have some examples here. So like in the marketing department, if we're really not answering the customer questions as clearly as we could, what if we added frequently asked questions to the website, or even streamlined it with a chatbot? One of the things that we see is that a good 20 to 25% of your traffic, people are looking for your phone number and a way to contact you. So if they can't find it or they just have an easy question, what if you had a chatbot that would be able to talk to them? Similarly, in the sales process, the classic problem for all salespeople, universally, me included, unfortunately, is leads. I need more leads. I need good leads. I need better leads. Why don't I have more leads? Well, the way in which you can do that and work that is by being more consistent in your cadence. And I'm going to talk about how the practical application. The book will tell you that the old school book will say that you have to contact somebody at least 3 times. Do you have any guess what the number is now?
Well, it's a lot. It's 5 to 7 at least is what I hear.
Yeah, as of 2021, it's 6 to 8. Before somebody takes you seriously. So somebody coming from not knowing you at all to actually entertaining, listening to you is 8 times. That means as a salesperson, you got to make 8 calls and you got to make it consistently, but you also have to not be pushy. And you also have to be providing some value on the way, which is not the easiest thing in the world to do.
Right.
Similarly, in the service department, if a customer has a problem with renewing, or if they just fall off after the end of their contract, what if you created an automated process for additional help? So when somebody's coming up on their 90-day renewal, and you can ask that salesperson to go back and have an additional conversation with them. So, but it's all set so that you don't have to think, oh man, Is Johnson and Company going to be coming back online? When was the last time anybody talked about that? You can set some processes in place in order to really get them to work and to fly.
Mm-hmm.
So I came up with a couple of different practical automations that you can do to help speed up your flywheel. And I'm curious, I know we've got some action in the chat pane. If anybody's got more things that they have questions about, you can feel free to, I know Dave's monitoring the chat, so
Yep.
you can feel free and ask us questions. But I think the most important one to me that we see all the time, David, is sales and marketing alignment.
Mm-hmm.
That, and I talked about that a little earlier, where the salespeople never think that the leads are any good, and the marketing people are just exasperated because they don't know what to do. So here's what we've done at BusyWeb and how we actually have leveraged the concept of automation in order to help. So every lead that comes in gets a consistent and constant lead follow-up. And what I mean by that is every lead that comes in, regardless of whether quality, regardless of whether or not we think it's weird or not, because sometimes they are weird and sometimes they're a little goofy, is they get 4 touch points in the first 12 days from when they contacted us. So somebody raises up a hand, we're going to contact them 4 times in 12 days. We do that. And again, I'm in sales, so I can admit that I'm a little child when it comes to this. And if I don't have it written down, I don't know what I'm supposed to do every day. Mm-hmm. So what we have is a sequence that we put in automatically that over the next 12 days will then create tasks for our salespeople that says, here on day 1, you call this person, on day 4, you call this person, on day 8, you call this person. On day 12, you call this person. And then from a business standpoint, we can actually measure that. So we know whether or not they've done this. This is both a tool and a process, Jill, and thanks for that question. It's a great question. So this is one of the things that we use automation for, is we have this process that we say we want somebody to be called 4 times in 12 days. Now what we're going to do is remind that that person that they have to do it.
Right. And
on a regular basis.
Since we're on here and Jill was asking the question, the graphic that you see on screen is a representation of the actual tool creating the process. So as someone visits a page and fills out a form, then you create a series of if-then statements in the tool. And not only is Trigvi calling or connecting, but we're also sending them things that they're asking for. And so if they download a white paper, for example, or maybe respond to a quiz or something else, or an inbound asset, then we give them not just what they're asking for, but a few days later, we'll follow up automatically and say, are you interested in anything else? Or if they click on something that would indicate an exact preference, so we know that they're really interested in lead generation and keeping this internal at BusyWeb, right? So we're interested, our clients are interested in lead generation, traffic, demand generation, and or just closing more deals, right? So depending on what they're looking for, we're going to give them additional tools using HubSpot in our case. But then also we know through our CRM, our customer relationship management database, that this person downloaded this document, they visited the About Us page on our website, and they did these other things. Our sales team then knows not only are they interested in these themes or these topics, but they were very dialed in on this specific topic. So when Trigvi picks up the phone, he's not just saying, hey, are you interested in talking to us and trying to, cold call? He's actually answering and injecting himself into a conversation that the customer has had with the marketing.
That they've already started the conversation. Yeah. I'm just picking it up mid-talk.
Exactly.
What the neat part about this is what we saw was there was a massive increase in sales activity, because we knew that everything that was going to happen was going to be, we were giving them a consistent experience on the sales side. And then what happened then is we took all that data and went back to our marketing team and said, hey, when we say the leads are bad, here's what we're doing and here's what we're seeing in order to come to that conclusion. Based on this data, do you see a different conclusion? And so what happened was we got to have a lot of really great conversations that were based not on what I think versus what somebody else thinks. It's based on here's what's actually happening. So Beth asked the question, at what point are you qualifying the lead to discover if it's worth reaching out? That's a great question. So Beth, what our marketing does is it's targeted based on the particular kind of person that we're trying to attract. So we are trying to focus on a certain group, and we actually have fictional representations and biographies of those people. So as we're thinking about who we want to talk to, we've already created marketing pieces that should, in theory, talk to them and resonate with them. So then if somebody actually fills out a form and puts up a hand and says, hey, I'm interested in talking, we are making the assumption at that point that they're already worth reaching out to.
Right. And this is an important conversation. So Beth, I'm glad you brought it up. There's two different kinds of qualification for leads. And the first one is a marketing qualified lead, which basically just asks, did the visitor do what we wanted them to do? A lot of marketing companies, a lot of our competitors will come out and just say, well, you got all these clicks on your website. Clicks are not leads. Yeah. Clicks are not anything other than someone visiting your website.
The clicks are Dave driving by a billboard this morning and not remembering what it is 3 hours later.
Right. And that's one of the first questions you should be asking of your marketing team, if you're not already engaged with someone, is to say, are we getting actual leads, and are those leads qualified? And qualified leads means, did they do what we asked them to do? So that's the marketing qualified lead level. And then after that person interacts with us, there's a second level. It's the sales qualified lead. And that's a lot more in-depth. SQLs, sales qualified leads, require the salesperson to verify that this is actually a good lead. Common things like, is it a junk Gmail account? Is it, mittens229@gmail.com instead of bob.smith@yourtargetcompany.com? That's a big one. The kinds of things that person has downloaded or are interested in is worthy of qualifying or disqualifying.
The pages they've seen on our website.
Right. So if they just go to the About Us form, a lot of times, and this is unfortunately just the way it is, a lot of times there's scammers or spammers or people that are just trying to interact on a massive scale. And so even if people are hitting your Contact Us form on your website, you have to verify if it's an actual real person or if it's someone that's just trying to sell you products and services, right? And so that's the second level, is qualifying at the interpersonal level to have that salesperson go through and say, this is a real email address. They appear to actually be interested in our services. They visited 2 of our pages, so that we know that they're probably serious, and they looked at our About Us page. So that really ticks all of the boxes. And by the way, we looked them up on LinkedIn, and they're in our target market.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one way that we use automation to reduce friction. The second one I wanted to talk about, this is one that's fun and a little bit scary, which is chatbots. So, and what exactly is a chatbot? Well, that's that little corner thing in the bottom of the screen that you see a lot that says, hey, I'm looking for help. It's kind of like Dave and I are old, so it was the thing that I sort of think about is the old Clippy from Microsoft Word, who would pop up and say, "Hey, looks like you're writing a letter. Would you like some help with that?" Mm-hmm. And that's really what chatbots are. It's really what it's supposed to do is the most obvious questions that people are interested in when they come to your website and they just want a quickie answer. Can they get it, and is it something that you can automate? And so this is one of the things that HubSpot does really neat, is they actually have a builder, so that when it built on their workflow system, so you can have a series of questions that are asked and answered by the person, so you can have a robot actually talk to somebody.
Right.
Now, generally speaking, you get about 3 steps in before they really need to you either need to say, okay, thank you for your information, I'll get somebody to get back to you, or transfer to a real person.
Right.
But beyond that first couple of steps, you can generally pick up a lot of yardage really quickly by getting somebody to just even interact on a short version with that. So like one of the things that's popular for us at BusyWeb is we have several hundred clients that we host and maintain their website for. So if they say, well, gosh, how, I want to talk to support. How do I do that? Well, we don't have the chatbot on right now, but we could set up a chatbot that says, that's a great question. Thank you. Here are the different ways in which you can contact the support team.
Right. And a lot of times when we talk to our clients and we're setting up chatbots in order to start the engagement process and make it a little bit easier, there's a couple of rules of the road for this. One is you don't want it to be too interruptive. And so if you go to a website and all of a sudden the chatbot pops up right in the middle of the page and it blocks and you have to click out of it in order to move, that's annoying, right? So we like to have our chatbots down further on the scroll so that we know that that person's actually engaged and they're interested. But then second, coming up with ideas for your chatbot or for topics for your chatbot to help with can be a little daunting, but you have a quick and easy shortcut in order to get some content for your chatbot. Look at your frequently asked questions. If you have an FAQ page on your website, you probably have a number of things that you know your customers always ask. If you can automate that response section and actually let people type their question in and then answer that question proactively, that makes it much, much more interesting and engaging than simply listing a bunch of FAQs on your website.
Now, the alternative to this is that you don't necessarily have to use a robot. You could use a real person.
Right.
You could have one of your staff members sitting there waiting for the chatbot to ding, and then they would be responsible for interacting with that person. That's great to a point. The problem with that is that most people right now are doing searches and really trying to validate their problems later at night. I know one of my most productive times that I am looking for answers for problems that I have is when I'm forced to watch a Wiener kids movie that I've watched 90 times already that my son loves. And I'll just be surreptitiously looking at my phone. And so if I see a chatbot, I'm like, oh, okay, great. Maybe I'll just ask that question of the chatbot. But if you have something that it doesn't answer, and it doesn't get back to me, then people are gone. So there's a double-edged sword to be had there, but it's also a great way for service teams to be able to pick up wind speed when they're, especially again, in our case with our service teams, if somebody says, hey, my website's down, the next question that our guys are going to ask is, great, what's the problem? What's down? You have 120 pages on your website, what's not working? So what ultimately that rolls up to is everybody just has the better experience and it's faster.
Right.
The next thing, which is sort of the traditional thing that you can see in marketing automation, is getting smarter with your marketing by using workflows. And I showed a picture of this earlier, and here's what one looks like. And this is really based on, it's a variation of the sequence. I talked about that in the sales process where you say, okay, these hard and fast things are going to happen every single time. A workflow is much more behavioral based. So based on the type of questions that people are answering and based on the actions that they're taking, we can have this entire choose your own adventure mapped out for them. So you can see here on screen, I've got something very simple. So the system's going to ask, how big is the deal that how big is the product inquiry that somebody has? Is it $50 or less, $50 to $100, or $100 more? Then based on that, I can automatically assign that deal to a specific team member without having to manually go in and say, okay, here's a new prospect. I want Jill or I want Beth to talk to them. I'm going to click it here. Then a day later, I'm going to say, hey, did you get that email? No, I'm going to know immediately that they're always going to go in there. And the other alternative that you can use this is that when you're sending people email and you're communicating with them, you're asking them to take an action, which is something as simple as click here or read more. And then you can design workflows that ask 5, 7, 10 days later, did that person take an action? If the answer is yes, great. Then let's communicate that with them in a very specific way. If the answer is no, great. Let's leverage that yes, no decision tree in order to get into more smarter content that's much more relevant based on the things that we know that our prospect is doing or not doing in the marketing standpoint. So a couple of things to keep in mind is when you're talking about workflows is it happens automatically when the customer wants it. So if you're trying to nurture people, so somebody who just throws up a hand and says, well, I'm kind of interested, I'd like to get your newsletter. That's not somebody you call and say, okay, great, what would you like to buy today? They just want your newsletter. They want a much more softer, they're still kicking the tires, they're still evaluating some things. Okay, great. However, you are still progressing them through a specific process. So they are going through a process and you are able to create some action items from it and monitor where they are in the process. The cool thing for the prospects is they get the more information depending on where they are in the process. So it's much more tailored to what they want. And all in all, a good rule of thumb to keep in mind is in this day and age, approximately 70% of all decisions are made before they even pick up the phone and talk to a salesperson. Mm-hmm. So the more that you can slow down the nurturing process and be much more targeted and available to them in the way in which they want to be available to is going to create a lot more yardage for you. Dave, what do you think?
Agreed completely. And I think especially when we're talking B2B, which is what most of our clients tend to be, it really is expected to have a depth of knowledge available to that researcher. And the other metric that I love kind of sharing is in B2B research. So if you're trying to decide your next accountant or your next supplier of manufacturing services, whether it be precision cutting or tool dies or whatever, you're going to click about 80 clicks before you ever connect or call a business. 80, and that means filling out a form. That means clicking call now. That means trying to find an email address or reaching out, right? So it really is important because people research heavily before they make a decision when they're in that earlier stage of their buyer's journey, right? So when they're in the consideration phase and they're just looking at different options, they're doing some research and they're not just looking at you, they're looking at your competition. So the more helpful and informative and deeper you can be in your conversation, and the more your online marketing can help guide them down that path, the more effective you're going to be in simply solving their problem and making them comfortable to reach out.
And if you ask those people while they're doing their research a sales-based question, they are gone.
Yep.
If you not talk to you. That's the equivalent of somebody at Walmart. Somebody says, "Hey, how can I help you?" You just say, "Oh no, I'm browsing."
Right.
Don't bother me.
We're old school, Trig, right? So if remember the Friends episode where Joey had the cologne and they were spraying people as they walked in the door,
spraying everybody,
right? It's the exact same thing. If you walk in and you spray all over one of your customers before they're ready to engage with you, they're going to run out the door. And
they're not buying that cologne.
No way in any well. So you just need to be as useful and as helpful and as assistive in your conversation as you possibly can. And the best way to do that is through automation, because you're giving them the choices. You can't just give people a page of an entire directory, right? Or put a Wikipedia up on one page of your website, because then people are going to be overwhelmed and they're just like, I don't even know what this means. So if you give it to them in small bites that lead to the next step, and you're getting right into it now, Trigby, this is the way to have an engaging, natural, quote unquote, natural conversation with a customer where it feels like you're actually consulting them and helping them solve their problem.
And that kind of gets into our fourth automated step, which is smart content. and figuring out the right content at the right time. So what do I mean by right content? Well, it really depends on what your business is. You know, what we do at VisiWeb is we sell websites, and that's really important, but it's not life threatening. And if you don't buy a website today, your business isn't necessarily going to end. However, conversely, if you are in your house and you go downstairs and all of a sudden you're ankle deep in water, that's a pressing emergency. And so there's differences in how you talk to your potential customer, and how and what you can do from a content perspective in order to make sure they're getting what they want as quickly as possible. So again, I want to point out that 70% of those decisions are made before somebody talks to a salesperson. So using smart content means that your customer is then at the center of the universe, and that how you're talking to them and the information you're providing them is relevant to them. So those are things that are generally what's considered evergreen, which means that they never really go out of season. It's like a really nice, beautiful pine tree. It's always pretty. And when you do that, what happens is that you end up getting a lot more visibility in a specific niche market, which is really what we start our sales process by asking somebody a simple question: who is the best fit customer for you, and can we replicate them? And can we get more of those? So once you start creating that smart content and giving that great experience to those people you want to deal with, then search engines are going to follow, and search engines are going to absolutely start picking up on what you're doing and how you're offering it. The format that we tend to try and default to is what we call the SMART format, where we say, let's make sure our content is specific, make sure that it's measurable. So we're asking people to do things, and it's bite-sized, it's actionable, it's realistic, and it's also timely. So if I don't have a leak right now, I don't need to necessarily read a blog post about what are the 5 things to do if your water heater explodes. But if my water heater has just exploded, the first thing I'm going to do is Google my water heater just exploded, and I'm immediately going to go to number 3 because I figure the first 2 I've already missed. And so that content is incredibly important to me right away. And again, the great equalizer to all this is good content is persistent and actionable, but it's not pushy. It's not saying that your life is going to be over unless you do this today. It's not saying that you've got to do this or else. It's helpful in the way in which you need to be helpful. And sometimes you can lean on somebody just a little to remind them of, well, hey, you're here and you have a problem. What are you going to do? What's going to change unless you do something?
Right.
That's a great question to ask to get people to think about, well, maybe I really do need to take an action. But reminding them that you've got a sale going on right now, and you've got a trip to Mazatlan that's available if you sell just one more thing by the end of the month. Nope, they're done. They're not listening to you.
Right. And it really is one of the best uses of automation is to engage people and give them just a little bit more. So you hopefully know who that person is, what their buying persona is, what they're interested in, what they need, based on what their actions have told you so far. And so that next outreach, that gentle reminder, that persistent push is a little bit more based on what you're talking about. So, dear prospect, one of the biggest questions that our customers always ask us when they're making a decision like this is X. And so giving them a handy resource or a guide, and always coming to them with a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more answer, or another helpful resource is a fantastic way to keep your calls or your emails from being spam or just dialing for dollars, and being a helpful, useful resource that actually helps to close deals.
One of the questions that we get asked a lot is, well, how long does it take? If I want you to rebuild my website, how long does it take? And so we have some content that we have that kind of explains that and says, here are things you need to consider. Here are things you need to look at. Here are things that you might want to start gathering so that as you're evaluating your new website provider, that you can get all that right at your fingertips. which really kind of gets to the last thing that I wanted to talk about today, which is streamlining of data. And this is really the biggest thing that we're seeing as a problem for just about every business right now, is they've got customer data and they've got important data and actionable data, but it's in 5 or 6 different places. And it's to the point where they're not even seeing how disparate their systems are. And that's one of the things that, I don't know about you, Dave, but one of the things I really like about HubSpot is it's one source of truth.
Right.
And
Exactly.
it's everywhere. So what I have on screen here is, this is actually our new website. You can see Dave on screen there in our conference room too. Is there's a couple of things going on here. First of all, is this is our contact page. So if you fill out our contact page, then you're going to get an email that's going to be sent. A lot of things are going to happen. But you see there that I didn't enter in my email address. My browser did that for me. So the guys who made the BusyWeb website knew that they could create that one little extra bit of automation, and that makes our customer a little bit quicker. Now, what's cool about this is that once this form is filled out, a number of things happen in the back end. Number one is this is automatically combined with our CRM. So all the data that gets filled out on this form goes immediately into the CRM. And then what happens is, depending upon what the person's need, what they need help with, it automatically gets assigned to somebody and a notification happens. So is it a support ticket? Great, then it goes immediately to the support people. We actually evaluate our support people based on how fast they answer the ticket. Similarly, in the sales standpoint, if somebody says, hey, I'm interested in something new, boom, fantastic. We want to make sure that we get back to them in the next 10 minutes. Now, keep in mind, we've also got all that information of what pages people are visiting and what they're having issues with. So having to, when we're trying, sort of in summary, the most important thing that you can think about when you are thinking about using automation for your company is creating one specific source of truth for everything. And then everything else is sort of satellite around that. By streamlining the data, and if you can find a product like HubSpot that has a lot of different functionalities that just automatically bolt on, and you can see in the bottom right there, I've got a list, a pictorial list of everything that HubSpot works and plays well with right out of the box. And it's literally hundreds and hundreds of things. The good news is it saves a ton on software integration. And it's easier too, because then you don't have to continually hire new IT people to try and make connections between the two things.
Right.
Now, I don't know about you, Dave, but one of the things that I see all the time is I'm basically an overgrown child, so I love shiny things. And if I see a new piece of software, it might do 1 or 2 things better than HubSpot, but overall, it only does those 1 or 2 things. So I always have to evaluate, because I have certain buying responsibilities, and I can basically, pick what I want for my sales team. Is I have to not only consider that new functionality, but how is it going to make the process easier and more streamlined?
Right. That's one of the important things that we do with our clients, is we help them to identify what their tech stack needs to be. And if they already have a tool in place, like for example, if they're using Salesforce for their CRM, there's no need to completely ditch their CRM because HubSpot has a similar tool. You can integrate with the marketing tools in HubSpot just as easily as you can to create something in Pardot on Salesforce. Yeah. And the other thing that we hear a lot is once we start talking about an all-encompassing system like HubSpot, there's a lot of reticence because people think it's too expensive. And the starter versions of HubSpot start at $50 a month for your sales software, your marketing software, and a beginner website. So it's definitely affordable for most companies. It's just a matter of if it's actually going to work for you. And finding a company and working with someone that can help you identify what those true needs are, and then tell you the truth about if you need it or not, is incredibly important.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that sometimes frustrates HubSpot about us, is that HubSpot's not always the best fit for everybody, and we're always going to be honest with our people. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us. We just have a couple more slides for those of you who are hanging out. Again, the goal here overall is to reduce friction in your flywheel, whatever that might be. So if you've got support tickets that are slow, can you fix that with automation? Yep. If you are missing customer touch points, can you fix that with automation or a new goal? The answer is absolutely. And or even if you've got an e-commerce solution, can you create abandoned carts at checkout? The answer is absolutely, and you can absolutely have that. So Jill, answer your question. If you use another CRM and export to HubSpot, yep, absolutely, you can do that. So wrapping up, what do we think are good actionable points for you from here? Well, identify your points of friction in your business and then ask yourself what can be automated. If you need some help, we'd be more than happy to help you with that. But what can you fix with different goals and adjustments to the team as well? So that automation is not a universal solve for everyone. It can help you make some bridges and pick up a little speed, but it's not necessarily a full-blown solve. And that's okay, but we can help you identify what it can and can't do. As thank you for participating today, we do have a lead calculator, which is a neat tool that you can fill out a quick form, and then we'll be able to tell you how many leads do you need to get in order to achieve your goals, and how does that affect in the marketing. And you can find that at busyweb.com/flywheel.
The nice part about that calculator piece is it's a downloadable spreadsheet that you can use. We're not going to call you and talk you through it. You're able to actually use this tool right from the get-go to make some actual next steps and hopefully take that to your team and say, okay, well, this is the number we actually need to hit. We thought we were here, but we need to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's our show for this month. This is a new format. So Carol, I saw you snuck back in. I want to apologize for having to watch us make the sausage a little, but we're working out the kinks. Hopefully you folks found this a little bit more engaging, that it's more of a conversation with Dave and I, as opposed to just another PowerPoint that somebody's performing for you. So we really like this. We're going to hope to continue this in the future. But if you're interested in talking to me or Dave, you can see that my email's on screen, and so is Dave. And we thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day.